Hello and welcome to Good or Bad. So the Freddy vs Jason review is over, so what shall I do next? Why don't I go back to where it all began? Let's start with Freddy and Nightmare on Elm Street. Released in 1984 and directed by Wes Craven, A Nightmare on Elm Street introduced the world to the Dreamstalker Freddy Krueger, and it was a pretty big hit.
Please, God.
This is God.
The movie utilised the famous dream sequence technique but took it to a whole new level. Instead of a one-off dream with a quick scare or even a meaningful message to the characters, this film used them as the villain's lair essentially. Because when someone falls asleep in this movie, they enter the dream world, which Freddy stalks and can do pretty much whatever he wants. And I think this added a new level of terror to the character. I mean, yeah, sure, a man with a knife can be scary, but that can be escaped, locked up, and you can even hide from that. But you can't avoid sleep. You can't escape tiredness. So it forces all the characters in the movie to confront Freddy in the end. You know the phrase, confront your nightmares. The movie opens with Freddy trying his glove on for the first time. Well, I assume it's the first time. And then we cut to what I again assume is years later. There are reasons for these assumptions, and if you know the story it's pretty obvious. But for those of you that don't know, it means you haven't watched my Freddy vs Jason review, in which case
I'll see you in your nightmares.
But until then I'll explain why it has to be years later. Freddy first made the glove when he was among the living, then he died, which I'll get to later, and he came back as someone who could invade your dreams and kill you in them. Which is why it has to be years later, unless Freddy just likes to reassemble his glove before he goes hunting in someone's dreams. Okay, now back to the movie. Here we have Amanda Weiss playing Freddy's first victim, Tina Gray, who is currently running around in her dreams while Freddy toys with her. She then wakes up the next day and she feels the need to talk, so she tells her friend and our main character, Nancy Thompson, who is played by Heather Langenkamp, and her boyfriend's played by Johnny Depp. And I'm not just pointing that out because he's famous now, he plays a significant part in the movie. Well, sort of. He gives us some advice.
Maybe we're gonna have a big earthquake. They say things get really weird just before.
My god, this movie flies through time like there's no tomorrow! And that makes no sense. Because Tina is having bad dreams, they decide to sleep over to keep her company, where they find out they all dreamt about the same person, a man in a dirty sweater with long fingernails.
Actually, they were more like finger knives or something he'd made himself. But they made a horrible sound. It's like, scream.
Jesus, Nancy, I thought you were there to make her feel better, not scare her even more. They hear a noise outside, which turns out to be a quick scare, in the form of Tina's boyfriend, Rod Lane. And because he is a stereotypical arsehole, that means at some point in this movie he is gonna die. They all go to sleep, so Freddy decides to check in on Nancy in a pretty cool scene. And then he decides to go after Tina again. Freddy chases her for a bit, but then it ends with quite a brutal death. Tina's boyfriend ran off, so everyone thinks he did it, and Nancy's father, who happens to be a cop, is a bit annoyed with her.
But I sure would like to know what the hell you were doing shacking up with 3 other kids in the middle of the night, especially a lunatic delinquent like Lane.
The following morning, Nancy decides she would rather go to school than sit at home thinking about it. On the way, she runs into Rod, who claims he didn't do it and someone else had to be in the room with them, but he couldn't see them. And then it turns out Nancy's father used her as bait and captures him. Nancy falls asleep in class and sees her friend Tina in a body bag, which leads her to Freddy, but she declares,
Come to Freddy.
you know, if that's all it takes to wake up in those dreams, Freddy really should look into hunting them down in a place that isn't a boiler room. She wakes up in class in a fit of screaming, so she gets out of school and visits Rod. She tells him that she believes him, then leaves. Much later on, Nancy asks Glenn to watch her while she sleeps because she is trying something. She goes to sleep and in her dreams visits Rod, where Freddy is about to kill him, but when he sees Nancy, he goes after her instead. She gets saved by an alarm clock, so they head over to the police station where they see what looks like suicide. Freddy's quite smart like that. No way is he letting the cops get his scent. They'll set the dream police on him. After Rod Lane's funeral, Nancy goes to a sleep disorder institute to try and figure out what is going on with her dreams. She falls asleep while being monitored and has a nightmare that is off the charts, where she pulls Freddy's hat out of her dream. Because her mother seemed to recognise the hat, Nancy pressures her into telling her what she knows about the man called Fred Krueger. But she just says,
Fred Krueger can't come after you, Nancy. He's dead. Believe me, I know.
You knew about him all this time?
Yeah, you knew she was having bad dreams, so why didn't you tell her about a very traumatic incident that happened in the town a very long time ago? Then she would have known that it had to be someone back from the dead who could haunt her dreams. Damn you! She talks to Glenn about her dreams and he gives her the advice I mentioned earlier. He read that if you create a monster in your dreams, you can turn your back on it, and that takes away the energy you gave it, so it can't hurt you. When Nancy gets home, she discovers her mother has put bars on all the windows. In the name of security! So I guess Nancy's mother put the bars up just in case Freddy did actually survive. But she doesn't seem to think so, but you know, precautions. She then tells Nancy about Freddy, how he was a child killer and when they caught him someone forgot to sign a warrant in the right place and he was freed. Then the parents of Springwood hunted him down and burnt him to death. Okay, that's understandable, but why did she keep Freddy's glove? Did she want a trophy or something? Nancy tells Glenn to meet her at midnight because she plans to bring Freddy out of her dream like she did with his hat, and she wants Glenn there to beat him down with a baseball bat. But of course he falls asleep, and his punishment is a very gory death. Hallelujah? This pisses Nancy off, so she booby-traps her house. And unlike the general maliciousness of Kevin McAllister, she knows how to do this because she read it in a book. Then, because her mother is drunk, she tucks her in and goes to confront Freddy. She finds Freddy in her dreams and grabs him when her alarm clock rings, and pulls him out into the real world, where Freddy chases her through the house, hitting each booby-trap on the way. She calls out to her father, who is investigating Glenn's death across the street, but it takes a while for any of the cops to think maybe we should tell the lieutenant about his daughter who is frantically screaming for help from a barred window. Nancy sets Freddy on fire and the cops finally decide to tell the lieutenant, after being given this specific instruction not so long ago.
Go outside and watch my daughter's house. If you see anything funny, call me.
They run over to Nancy and break down the door. The cops go in and put the fire out downstairs, but Nancy sees fiery footsteps leading upstairs. She takes her father with her and they see Freddy attacking Nancy's mother. They put the fire out and I have no idea what that is. But at least the bed's neatly made. After the blue fadey corpse weirdness, she asks for a moment alone. Then Freddy rises, but Nancy knows the secret now. She has to deny his existence, take back the energy she gave him by being afraid. And he turns into blue sparkly stuff and disappears. Then it's morning again, her mother's back and her friends are back. Then she lives happily ever after. Okay, maybe not. So that was A Nightmare on Elm Street. What can I say? It's a classic. It gave birth to a hugely popular horror icon. But is it as perfect as people say? No, I don't think it is. The movie has quite a few predictable scares. I don't think the characters were that well fleshed out. I mean, we have the generic split-up parents, generic boyfriend, generic best friend, generic douchey boyfriend of the best friend, and last but not least, Nancy herself. I know some people praise this character, saying she was written well, acted well, and just all round a very good lead character. But honestly, I thought she was quite bland. I don't dislike her or anything, but I just don't think she is that memorable. But my biggest problem with this movie was the ending. Now I think there's two ways to look at it. One, the entire ending to the movie was a dream, and Freddy was playing on Nancy's hopes and wishes. It would certainly explain how Freddy could do that, or that, and then that. But the sequels kind of rule this out. But if it wasn't all a dream at the end, and Freddy really was in the real world, how could he do that, or that, and then that? Unless his powers carry over, in which case he sucks. Because that hammer beat the hell out of him. So it felt like they were going for an it's open to interpretation thing. But the sequels rule it all out, so... Now before you lot lynch me or anything, I will say what I like about this movie, which thankfully is more than I dislike about it. Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger was great. We saw the right amount of him for the suspense to do its job. As well as that, several of the effects were great, especially for an 80s horror movie. But above all, it was just the setup to the movie, a killer that could get you in your dreams. The movie gave people nightmares about Freddy Krueger for years. So overall, I do love this movie. It has problems, but I love it regardless. Oh, I almost forgot the other thing the movie gave us. The Freddy Krueger lullaby. Sleep well.